Commander Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the New Haven Defense Station, watching the morning sun rise over golden wheat fields that stretched to the horizon. The sight never got old. 2 years ago, this had been empty grassland. Now 2.3 million people called this world home. Children played in the streets of Promise Valley, farmers tended their crops, and engineers built new cities every month. It was everything humanity had dreamed of when they first reached for the stars. Jake sipped his coffee and checked his daily reports. 3 broken fence repairs where local wildlife had wandered into the farming zones. A minor dispute between 2 mining companies over territorial boundaries. A request for more security patrols near the northern settlements where some of the bigger predators had been spotted. Nothing that couldn't be handled by his small garrison of 800 soldiers. That was the beauty of New Haven. It didn't need a massive military presence. The planet had no hostile native species, no dangerous weather patterns, no valuable resources that might attract pirates or raiders. It was simply a good place for families to build new lives, far from the crowded cities of Earth and the older colonies. Dr. Lisa Grant knocked on Jake's office door around noon, carrying a tablet full of data and wearing the excited expression she got when she discovered something interesting about the local ecosystem. Lisa had been studying New Haven's wildlife for 3 years, cataloging every species from the tiny silver butterflies that swarmed the meadows to the massive herbivores that roamed the southern plains. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa said, setting her tablet on his desk. "I've been analyzing the geological layers in the Northern Canyon system. Look at these mineral deposits." Jake studied the colorful charts and graphs, understanding maybe half of what he was looking at. "Looks like normal rock formations to me. What am I missing?" "These aren't natural formations," Lisa explained, pointing to specific layers in the data. "See these glass deposits? They're created by extreme heat, the kind you get from plasma bombardment. And look at the dating. This happened roughly 800 years ago, then again 1,200 years ago, and before that about 1,600 years ago. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying someone bombed this planet 3 different times? Not just bombed. Sterilized. These glass layers show evidence of weapons designed to kill everything living and make the soil unusable for centuries. Each time, it took about 400 years for life to fully recover. We're living on a world that's been completely destroyed and rebuilt at least 3 times. Before Jake could respond, his communication officer's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander Morrison, we're receiving a priority transmission from long-range sensors. Multiple ships approaching the system. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. Jake." And Lisa hurried to the command center, where Sergeant Ben Williams was studying the sensor data with a frown. "Sir, we're looking at a fleet of approximately 200 vessels. Configuration doesn't match any known human ships or friendly alien contacts." The main screen showed a tactical display of the approaching fleet. The ships were massive, each one easily 3 times the size of the largest human battleship. They moved in perfect formation, their course aimed directly at New Haven. "Any response to our standard greeting protocols?" Jake asked. "Nothing, sir. They're maintaining communication silence." Helen Brooks, the colony's administrator, arrived within minutes of being called. Helen was a tough woman in her 50s who had overseen the establishment of 12 different human colonies. She took one look at the sensor data and her face went pale. "How long until they reach orbit?" she asked. 5.5 hours, Ben replied. "And how long to evacuate the planet?" Jake ran the numbers in his head. "With our current transport capacity, at least 3 weeks to move everyone to safety. We have maybe a dozen civilian cargo ships and 2 military transports." An hour later, the alien fleet finally responded to human communications. The message was brief and delivered in perfect English by a voice that sounded like grinding metal. Humans of the colony world designated New Haven. I am Admiral Vextar of the Cruel Empire. Speaking for the Hegemony Coalition, your species has been judged a threat to galactic stability. You have established 23 colonies and 50 years of interstellar presence. Other species required centuries to achieve such expansion. This aggressive growth cannot be permitted to continue. Jake exchanged glances with Helen and Lisa. Aggressive growth? Humans had been peaceful in every contact with alien species. They followed all galactic laws, respected territorial boundaries, and had never initiated hostilities with anyone. The message continued. The Hegemony Coalition, representing 6 species and 400 worlds, hereby demands the immediate withdrawal of all human presence beyond your origin system. You have 72 hours to begin evacuation of all human colonies. Failure to comply will result in total pacification of human settlements. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Total pacification, Helen repeated. Quietly, that's a fancy way of saying they plan to kill everyone. Jake activated the emergency protocols, sending coded messages to Earth and the other human colonies. But he knew help wouldn't arrive in time. The nearest human military base was 3 weeks away, and even if they sent every available ship immediately, it would barely make a dent in a fleet of 200 warships. Over the next day, Jake watched helplessly. As the alien fleet took up positions around New Haven, the ships were impressive and terrifying, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. They deployed orbital platforms over every major human settlement, clearly visible from the ground as bright dots moving across the sky. The aliens, who called themselves the Hegemony, weren't interested in negotiation. They ignored every attempt at communication from the colonists. Their ships simply waited in perfect formation, counting down the hours until their ultimatum expired. Lisa spent the time analyzing every scrap of data she could gather about the approaching fleet. Jake, I think I know what happened to the previous inhabitants of this world. The geological evidence matches what we're seeing now. Those plasma bombardment signatures, the systematic sterilization of the planet. The Hegemony has done this before. How many times? Jake asked. Based on the patterns I'm seeing, probably dozens of worlds over the past few thousand years. They find a species that's expanding too quickly, give them an ultimatum, then wipe them out when they refuse to comply. Jake stared out at the peaceful farmland below the command center. Families were still going about their daily lives, though many had heard rumors about the ships in the sky. Children played in the streets, unaware that they had less than 48 hours to live unless a miracle occurred. Why us? He asked. Humans have been peaceful. We've never attacked anyone. Because we're successful, Lisa replied. In 50 years we've built thriving colonies on 23 worlds. We adapt quickly, reproduce effectively, and our settlements grow faster than anyone expected. To them, that makes us dangerous. Helen joined them on the observation deck, carrying a tablet with evacuation reports. I've managed to get about 50,000 people off-world using our transport ships. Priority went to children and families. But we're not even close to moving everyone, Jake nodded. Keep trying. Every life we save matters. As the second day passed, the alien fleet began deploying additional orbital weapons platforms. Long-range sensors showed energy signatures building up in the weapon systems. The Hegemony was preparing for their promised pacification. Jake sent one final message to Earth, knowing it would take weeks to reach home. This is Commander Jake Morrison of New Haven Colony. If anyone receives this transmission, know that we face the end with courage. The Hegemony Coalition has declared war on humanity for the crime of being successful. They plan to sterilize our world in less than 24 hours. We've evacuated as many as possible, but most of our people will not survive. Tell our families we stood our ground. Tell Earth what happened here. and tell them that humanity deserves better than this. The message went out into the void as the alien fleet prepared to unleash hell on New Haven. The countdown timer on Jake Morrison's command screen showed exactly 0 when the first plasma bolt struck Promise Valley. The blast was visible from space, a brilliant flash that turned night into day across half the planet. Where the capital city had stood just seconds before, now there was only a crater of melted glass and twisted metal. Jake watched in horror as his sensors registered the death of 400,000 people in a single moment. The city where children had played in parks and families had gathered for evening meals was simply gone. The aliens hadn't even given them a chance to surrender. "Sir, incoming bombardment on sectors 7 through 12, Sergeant Ben Williams reported, his voice shaking. "They're hitting the farming communities." More flashes lit up the horizon as the hegemony fleet systematically destroyed every human settlement. The attacks weren't random. They followed a careful pattern, starting with the largest cities and working down to the smallest villages. Each blast was precisely placed to kill the maximum number of people while leaving the surrounding landscape completely sterile. Dr. Lisa Grant was 40 kilometers away at her research station when the bombardment began. She had been studying soil samples when the night sky erupted in fire. Her first instinct was to contact the main colony, but the communication networks were already destroyed. Her research team of 8 scientists huddled in the underground laboratory, watching their instruments register massive energy discharges across the planet. "Dr. Grant, look at these readings," called out Dr. Kevin Martinez, her assistant. "The plasma they're using isn't just designed to kill. It's changing the molecular structure of the soil itself." Lisa studied the data streaming in from her remote sensors. The alien weapons weren't just destroying buildings and people. They were poisoning the earth, making it impossible for anything to grow for hundreds of years. This wasn't conquest or even simple murder. This was complete extermination. "They've done this before," she whispered, remembering her geological findings. "This is exactly what happened to the previous inhabitants." Meanwhile, in the underground bunkers beneath the defense station, Jake tried to coordinate with his scattered forces. Most of his garrison had been stationed near the major cities to help with crowd control during the evacuation. Those soldiers were dead now, vaporized along with the civilians they had been trying to protect. "All units report status." Jake called over the emergency frequency. Static answered him. Of his 800 soldiers, only about 200 were still alive, scattered across the planet in small groups. The hegemony had been thorough in their targeting. Lieutenant Amy Foster's voice crackled through the interference. "Command, this is Foster. I'm at Mining Station Delta with 37 personnel. We're seeing hegemony ground forces deploying near our position." "Copy that, Foster. Go dark and avoid contact. They're not interested in prisoners." The alien ground forces were different from their space fleet. While the ships maintained their cold, efficient bombardment from orbit, the ground troops seemed to take pleasure in hunting down survivors. They moved through the ruins of human settlements with methodical precision, using scanners to detect life signs and portable plasma weapons to eliminate anyone they found. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Charles Kane received the first reports from New Haven 18 hours after the attack began. The automated emergency beacons had been transmitting continuously, sending horrific images and data across interstellar space. Kane sat in his office at Defense Command Headquarters, watching footage of children running from plasma fire, of families trapped in collapsed buildings, of entire cities reduced to radioactive craters. The Admiral was a career military officer who had served in 3 different wars, but nothing had prepared him for this. The systematic nature of the attack, the complete disregard for civilian life, the obvious intent to wipe out every trace of human presence on New Haven. It was beyond anything he had imagined possible. "Sir, we're receiving similar reports from 12 other human colonies," reported his aide, Captain Susan Phillips. The hegemony fleet has split up and is attacking multiple worlds simultaneously. Kane felt his blood turn to ice. This wasn't just an attack on New Haven. It was a coordinated assault on humanity itself. The aliens were trying to destroy every human colony beyond Earth in a single devastating strike. "Send word to all fleet commanders," Kane ordered. "Total mobilization. I want every ship we have moving toward the attacked colonies within 6 hours. Sir, even if we strip every defense garrison, we can't match their numbers." Intelligence. Estimates put the hegemony force at over 1,200 ships across all theaters. Kane stood and walked to the large display showing human space. Red markers indicated colonies under attack, while blue markers showed the locations of human fleet units. The math was simple and brutal. Even combining every available ship, humanity could field maybe 300 vessels against the alien armada. "I don't care about the numbers," Kane said quietly. "Those are our people dying out there." Back on New Haven, the bombardment continued for 3 days. The hegemony ships took turns, ensuring that the plasma bombardment never stopped. They weren't just trying to kill the colonists quickly. They wanted to make sure nothing survived, that the planet would remain dead and poisoned for centuries to come. Lisa Grant and her team remained hidden in their research station, surviving on emergency supplies while the world burned around them. Her instruments continued to record data, building a detailed picture of the alien weapons and tactics. She realized that this information might be the only thing that could help other human colonies survive similar attacks. "Dr. Grant, I'm picking up a transmission," Kevin reported. "It's being broadcast on all frequencies across human space." The message was from Admiral Vex Tar himself, transmitted from his flagship above the dying world. "Humans of Earth and the remaining colonies, witness the fate of those who ignore the will of the hegemony. Your species' expansion ends here. Withdraw from all worlds beyond your origin system, or share the fate of New Haven." The transmission included footage of the bombardment, edited to show the most horrific moments. Cities burning, families fleeing, children crying for parents who would never come home. It was designed to break human morale, to make other colonies surrender without a fight. But something else came through in the alien Admiral's voice. Pride, satisfaction. The hegemony wasn't just eliminating a threat. They were enjoying it. Lisa managed to boost her station's transmitter using power from the research equipment. Her final message to Earth was transmitted just as hegemony ground forces began closing in on her position. "This is Dr. Lisa Grant, New Haven Colony. I'm transmitting all data on hegemony weapons and tactics. They're using a specific type of plasma that sterilizes soil at the molecular level. This isn't their first genocide. My geological surveys show they've exterminated at least 12 other species using these same methods. The patterns are identical. They give a 72-hour ultimatum, then systematically destroy everything." Her hands shook as she compiled the data files. They're not just trying to stop human expansion. They're eliminating any species that shows rapid growth or technological advancement. We're not their first victims, but we could be their last. If someone stops them. The transmission cut off as plasma bolts began hitting the research station. Lisa and her team had enough time to destroy their equipment and activate the emergency beacon, but there was nowhere to run. The hegemony ground forces had surrounded the facility. Jake Morrison's last stand came on the 4th day. His remaining 200 soldiers had gathered in the underground mining complex where Lieutenant Foster's group had been hiding. They had managed to evacuate about 3,000 civilians into the deepest tunnels, but the hegemony forces were closing in. "Sir, they're using some kind of scanning device," Foster reported. "They know exactly where we are." Jake checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left for his rifle, plus a handful of grenades. Around him, his soldiers prepared for a final battle. They knew they couldn't win, But they would make the aliens pay for every step. "Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves," Jake told his troops. "Every minute we delay them is another minute for the civilians to get deeper into the tunnels. Every alien we take down is one less to attack the next human world." The first hegemony soldiers entered the mining complex exactly at noon on the fourth day. They advanced with confidence, expecting to find terrified survivors ready to surrender. Instead, they found humans who had decided to go down fighting. The battle lasted 6 hours. Jake's soldiers used every trick they knew, turning the mining tunnels into a deadly maze of ambushes and booby traps. They couldn't stop the aliens, but they made them pay dearly for their victory. Jake Morrison died defending the entrance to the deepest tunnels, his body blocking the passage even in death. His final act was to trigger the mining charges, bringing down half the complex and buying the survivors a few more precious hours. Above ground, the hegemony fleet prepared to move on to their next target. New Haven was dead, its cities reduced to glass, its people scattered to the winds. Admiral Vextar reviewed the casualty reports with satisfaction. Another aggressive species eliminated before they could become a real threat. But deep in the planet's core, in tunnels too deep for the aliens to reach, 3,000 humans remained alive. Fleet Admiral Charles Kane stood in the main briefing room at Earth Defense Command, staring at the massive display screen that showed the aftermath of New Haven. The images had been streaming in for 2 days now, each one more horrific than the last. Entire cities reduced to glass craters. Farmland turned into poisoned wasteland. Bodies of children scattered among burning wheat fields. The room was filled with Earth's top military commanders, government officials, and intelligence analysts. Everyone sat in stunned silence as the final casualty reports came in. New Haven, colony, population 2.3 million, had been completely destroyed. Only scattered groups of survivors remained, hiding in deep caves and abandoned mines. President Maria Santos sat at the head of the conference table, her face pale but determined. She had been in office for 6 years, dealing with economic issues and peaceful diplomatic relations with alien species. Nothing had prepared her for this moment. "Admiral Kane, what's our current military status?" she asked. Kane activated his tactical display. "Madam President, we have 127 ships immediately available for deployment. Another 95 vessels can be ready within 2 weeks if we recall all patrol units and strip the home defense fleet. Intelligence reports indicate the hegemony has over 1,200 ships spread across multiple attack groups." Secretary of Defense Robert Hayes shook his head. "The numbers don't work in our favor. Even if we combine our entire fleet, we're outnumbered 4-1. "Numbers won't matter," said General Patricia Collins, commander of Earth's ground forces. "I've been reviewing the tactical data from New Haven. The hegemony isn't just trying to defeat us. They're trying to exterminate us. This isn't war as we understand it, it's genocide." President Santos stood and walked to the main display, studying the images of destroyed human settlements. "How many other colonies are under attack?" 12 confirmed, with more reports coming in every hour, Kane replied. "The pattern is identical at each location." A 72-hour ultimatum, followed by systematic orbital bombardment and ground extermination operations. Dr. Angela Reed, Earth's chief xenobiologist, had been studying the alien weapons data transmitted by Dr. Lisa Grant before New Haven fell. "The plasma weapons they're using aren't designed for conquest. They're designed for permanent sterilization. The soil composition shows molecular changes that will prevent any life from growing for at least 500 years. They want to make sure these worlds can never be inhabited again." The president returned to her seat and looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leadership. These were good people who had spent their careers trying to keep humanity safe through diplomacy and peaceful expansion. But diplomacy had failed. The aliens weren't interested in negotiation or compromise. They wanted every human beyond Earth to die. "I'm calling for an emergency vote of the Global Defense Council," Santos announced. "The question before us is simple. Do we withdraw from all our colonies as the hegemony demands, or do we fight?" General Collins was the first to speak. "Madam President, if we abandon our colonies, we're condemning millions of people to death. The hegemony has already shown they don't honor ceasefires or accept surrenders. They'll kill our colonists whether we withdraw or not." Intelligence Director Mark Freeman nodded. "Our analysis of hegemony tactics supports that conclusion. They've done this before to other species. Even when those species agreed to their demands, the hegemony exterminated them anyway. They see rapid expansion as a genetic threat that must be eliminated." Admiral Kane stepped forward. "There's something else the Council needs to consider. The footage from New Haven isn't just reaching Earth. It's spreading to every human colony, every space station, every ship in our merchant fleet. Our people have seen what the hegemony does to civilians. If we don't respond, we'll face rebellion in our own ranks." President Santos called for the vote. One by one, every member of the Global Defense Council voted the same way. The decision was unanimous. "Total War Resolution Alpha is hereby approved," Santos announced. "As of this moment, humanity's in a state of total war with the Hegemony Coalition. Admiral Kane, you have full authority to deploy all available military assets as you see fit." Kane nodded grimly. He had hoped never to hear those words in his lifetime. Total War Resolution Alpha hadn't been used since the corporate wars of the 22nd century. It meant every resource, every ship, every soldier was now dedicated to a single purpose: the complete destruction of the enemy. But Kane had already been planning. While the politicians debated, he had been studying the intelligence data from New Haven and the other attacked colonies. The hegemony fought like most advanced civilizations, with careful tactics and respect for military traditions. They targeted government centers and military installations, avoided unnecessary destruction of infrastructure, and treated war as a formal process with rules and boundaries. They were about to learn that humans fought very differently when their families were murdered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kane addressed the room, "the hegemony thinks they're fighting a conventional war against a minor species. They're wrong on both counts. What they've done to New Haven and our other colonies isn't war. It's mass murder. And humanity doesn't respond to mass murder with conventional tactics." He activated a new display showing human space and the known locations of hegemony worlds. "For 50 years, we've been the peaceful newcomers in galactic society. We've followed their laws, respected their boundaries, and tried to fit in. That ends now. They wanted to see what humans do when we're really motivated. They're about to find out." Kane's strategy was unlike anything in military textbooks. Instead of gathering humanity's fleet for a single massive battle, he divided the ships into dozens of small, fast attack groups. Each group received detailed intelligence about hegemony worlds, industrial centers, military bases, and government facilities. Captain Roy Jensen commanded the battleship Vengeance, one of humanity's newest and most powerful warships. When he received his orders, he recorded a message in his personal log that would later become famous throughout human space. "They came to our worlds and murdered our children. They burned our farms and poisoned our soil. They thought this would make us afraid, make us surrender. They were wrong. We're not afraid. We're angry, and they're about to learn the difference." The first human counterattack ships launched from Earth within 48 hours of the Council vote. They didn't head toward New Haven or the other colonies under siege. Instead, they set course for the hegemony's own worlds, carrying weapons and orders that would have shocked the peaceful colonists of New Haven. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis led a strike group toward the cruel homeworld, the seat of Admiral Vextar's empire. Her mission briefing was simple: make them regret every human life they had taken. The rules of engagement were equally straightforward. No hegemony military personnel or government officials were to be spared, but civilian populations were to be protected at all costs. Meanwhile, Captain Mike Thompson's destroyer group approached the Vorthik industrial complex, humanity's target list having expanded beyond military objectives. The hegemony had built their weapons in these factories, and humanity intended to make sure no more genocide weapons would ever be produced there. Back on Earth, the footage from New Haven continued to stream across every news network, every military base, every civilian gathering place. The images of murdered children and burning cities had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for generations. The peaceful, diplomatic species that had spent 50 years trying to fit into galactic society was gone. In its place was something far more dangerous. Dr. Reed worked around the clock with teams of scientists, analyzing every piece of data from the hegemony attacks. They weren't just studying alien weapons and tactics. They were learning everything they could about hegemony biology, psychology, and culture. Information that would be critical for what came next. "Admiral Kane," she reported during one of the daily briefings, "we've identified the specific individuals responsible for planning and executing the New Haven genocide. Admiral Vextar was the overall commander, but we have names and locations for every ship captain, every ground force commander, and every government official who approved the operation." Kane smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "Excellent. Transmit that data to all strike groups. This is going to be personal." The hegemony had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human nature. They assumed that a species that had been peaceful for 50 years would remain peaceful when threatened. They believed that the massive casualties at New Haven would break human morale and force a quick surrender. Instead, they had awakened something that would haunt their nightmares for generations to come. Humanity at war wasn't just dangerous because of their ships and weapons. They were dangerous because they remembered every face, every name, every injustice. And they never stopped hunting those responsible. The first human revenge strikes would begin in less than a week. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had spent so much effort trying to stay peaceful, and what happened when that effort finally failed. Captain Amy Sullivan's battleship Retribution dropped out of hyperspace just outside the cruel home system, exactly 3 weeks after New Haven burned. She stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display show 17 other human ships materializing around her. This was Strike Group Alpha, tasked with delivering humanity's message to the species that had started this war. "All ships, this is Sullivan," she broadcast on the fleet frequency. "Remember, we're not here to conquer territory or capture resources. We're here to make them regret every human life they took. Target the individuals responsible, protect the civilians, and show them what happens when you murder our children." The cruel homeworld of Vexthoric was a beautiful planet with crystal cities and floating gardens, home to 400 million aliens who had lived in peace for centuries. Most of them had no idea their military had just committed genocide against human colonies. They were about to learn anyway. Sullivan's first target wasn't a military base or government center. It was the private estate of Admiral Vextar himself, the alien commander who had personally ordered the destruction of New Haven. Human intelligence had located his family compound on the planet's northern continent, complete with his wife, children, and extended family. The Retribution's weapons officer, Lieutenant Mark Chun, locked onto the target. "Captain, we have a clear shot at the Admiral's estate. Shall I fire?" Sullivan paused for a moment, thinking about the images she had seen from New Haven. Children running from plasma fire. Families trapped in burning buildings. Entire cities reduced to glass craters. Then she thought about what Admiral Vextar would expect her to do, how he would assume humans would fight this war. "Negative on the weapons lock, Lieutenant. Transport teams, prepare for deployment. We're going in person." 20 minutes later, Sullivan led a team of Marines through the halls of Vextaris estate. The alien guards had been easily overwhelmed. Their weapons and tactics designed for fighting other cruel warriors, not humans trained in urban warfare. Sullivan found the Admiral's family in their private dining room, huddled together in terror. "Are you Admiral Vextar's wife?" Sullivan asked the largest alien, who wore expensive jewelry and fine clothes. The alien nodded, too frightened to speak. "Your husband murdered 2.3 million humans 3 weeks ago. Men, women, children, babies. He burned their cities and poisoned their farmland." Sullivan's voice was calm, almost conversational. "I could kill you and your children right now. It would be fair revenge, by the standards your husband established." The alien family cowered, expecting death. Instead, Sullivan activated her communicator. "Transport, lock onto these coordinates. Beam these civilians to the refugee center in the capital city. Full protection protocols." As the aliens disappeared in shimmers of light, Sullivan turned to her Marines. "Set charges on the building. We're sending a message, but not the one they expect." The estate exploded in a spectacular fireball visible from orbit. But the alien family survived, safe in a human-protected refugee center. Within hours, news networks across cruel space were broadcasting the story. The humans had destroyed the Admiral's home but saved his family. It was the opposite of what hegemony forces had done at New Haven. Meanwhile, Captain Rick Anderson's strike group hit the Vorthek industrial world of Macron Prime. The planet produced 60% of the hegemony's advanced weapons, including the plasma bombardment systems used to sterilize human colonies. Anderson's mission was simple: destroy the weapons factories and capture the engineers who had designed the genocide weapons. The space battle over Macron Prime lasted only 4 hours. The Vorthek Defense Fleet was designed to fight according to galactic conventions, with formal challenges and structured engagements. Anderson's ships ignored all the rules, using tactics that would have been considered dishonorable in traditional alien warfare. Human fighters swarmed the alien ships like angry insects, targeting life support systems instead of weapons. When alien commanders tried to surrender according to galactic protocols, the humans simply ignored them and continued attacking. The message was clear: there would be no honorable surrender for species that murdered children. Lieutenant Colonel Janet Price led the ground assault on the main weapons facility. Her troops moved through the factory complex with surgical precision, guided by intelligence data that identified every engineer, every supervisor, every administrator who had worked on the New Haven bombardment weapons. "Colonel, we've located Dr. Kethros, the chief weapons designer," reported Sergeant Tim Foster over the CUM system. "He's barricaded in Laboratory Section C with 12 other scientists." Price made her way to the laboratory, where she found the alien scientists trembling behind an improvised barricade. Dr. Kethros was a tall, thin creature with multiple arms and large eyes that showed obvious intelligence and fear. "Dr. Kethros," Price said, consulting her tablet, "you designed the plasma bombardment system used at New Haven, the weapon that poisoned our farmland and killed our children." The alien scientist nodded reluctantly. "Good, you're coming with us. You're going to help us understand exactly how your weapons work, and then you're going to help us design countermeasures." Price gestured to her soldiers. "Secure the prisoners." "For transport, what about the factory?" Foster asked. Price looked around at the massive industrial complex where genocide weapons had been manufactured. "Burn it, all of it. Make sure nothing here can ever be used to hurt civilians again." The destruction of Macron Prime's weapons facilities sent shockwaves through hegemony space. In a single day, humans had eliminated 60% of their advanced weapons production capability. But more importantly, they had captured the scientists responsible for designing the genocide weapons back in human space. Dr. Angela Reed led a team of researchers in questioning the captured hegemony scientists. The aliens were confused and terrified by human interrogation methods, which consisted mostly of showing them footage from New Haven and asking them to explain their work. Dr. Kethros, Reed said during one session, "Help me understand the purpose of this molecular destabilization component in your plasma weapons." The alien scientist studied the technical diagrams with his large eyes. The destabilization prevents soil regeneration for approximately 500 standard years. It ensures that conquered worlds cannot support life, preventing the return of defeated species. So you deliberately designed weapons to make planets uninhabitable, not just to win battles, but to make sure nothing could ever live there again. Yes, it is the most efficient method of species elimination. Reed nodded and made notes. And how many species has the hegemony eliminated using these methods? Dr. Kethros counted on his multiple fingers. 17 species over the past 2,000 years. All were identified as expansion threats and dealt with appropriately. The information was immediately transmitted to every human military unit in the field. The hegemony hadn't just attacked humanity. They were serial genociders who had wiped out 17 entire species over 2 millennia. The knowledge only strengthened. Human resolve. Admiral Vextar himself finally encountered human forces when Captain Danny Walsh's strike group cornered his flagship near the hegemony border territories. The alien admiral had been retreating from system to system, trying to regroup his scattered forces for a counterattack. Against human worlds, Walsh's ship surrounded the massive, cruel battleship like wolves circling wounded prey. The human captain opened a communication channel to the alien flagship. "Admiral Vextar, this is Captain Walsh of the human battleship Fury. I have a message for you from the people of New Haven." Vextar's voice crackled over the comm system, speaking in heavily accented English. "Human captain, I demand that you respect the galactic conventions of warfare. I am prepared to discuss terms of surrender according to established protocols." Walsh laughed, a sound that chilled every alien on the listening frequency. "Surrender? Admiral, you seem to be confused about the situation. You're not surrendering to us. You're being hunted by us. There's a significant difference." The human ships began their attack, but not in any pattern the alien admiral recognized. Instead of targeting the battleship's weapons or engines, they focused on the life support systems, communication arrays, and escape pod bays. They weren't trying to destroy the ship quickly. They were making sure no one aboard could escape. "You wanted to see what humans do when we're really motivated," Walsh continued as his ship systematically disabled the alien vessel. "Congratulations. Admiral, you've succeeded. We're showing the galaxy what happens when someone murders our families." The battle lasted 6 hours, with the alien battleship slowly losing system after system. Vextar's crew begged him to surrender, but the human ships ignored all attempts at communication. Finally, with his ship dead in space and his crew trapped, the alien admiral made his final transmission. "This is Admiral Vextar to all hegemony forces. The humans. They don't fight like any species we've encountered. They don't follow galactic conventions. They don't accept surrender. They fight like they have nothing left to lose." His voice grew quieter, filled with something that might have been regret. "We didn't start a war. We woke up something that should have been left sleeping. These humans are not the peaceful species we believe them to be. They are something far more dangerous." 6 months after the New Haven massacre, Fleet Admiral Charles Kane stood in what had once been the Hegemony Council chambers on Nexus Prime. The massive building was damaged but still functional, its crystal walls cracked from the human assault that had ended the war. Around him, the debris of a fallen empire told the story of what happened when someone pushed humanity too far. The war was over, but not through negotiation or diplomatic compromise. The Hegemony Coalition had simply ceased to exist. 3 of The 6-member species had surrendered unconditionally within 4 months, begging for mercy from the humans they had tried to exterminate. 2 other species had fled to distant parts of the galaxy, abandoning their homeworlds rather than face continued human retaliation. The cruel Empire, once the most powerful member of the Coalition, existed now only as scattered refugee fleets hiding in asteroid fields and dead systems. Kane walked through the ruins of the council chamber, where alien leaders had planned the genocide of 17 different species over 2,000 years. The irony wasn't lost on him. The chamber that had authorized so much death was now the place where humanity would announce the new rules for galactic civilization. Dr. Lisa Grant approached him from across the chamber. She had survived the destruction of New Haven, rescued from the deep mining tunnels where 3,000 humans had hidden during the bombardment. Now she wore the uniform of the new Galactic Xenological Institute, an organization dedicated to preventing future genocides. "Admiral, the memorial construction is proceeding on schedule," she reported. "The crystal monument should be completed within 2 months," Kane nodded. The memorial was being built on the site where New Haven's capital city had once stood. It would be a massive structure visible from orbit, engraved with the names of every being, human and alien, who had died in the conflict. The inscription would be simple but powerful: "Never again." "Any word from the Vorthik delegation?" Kane asked. "They're requesting permission to establish a new colony world under human protection," Lisa replied. "Apparently, 3 other hegemony species are making similar requests. They're afraid of revenge attacks from species the hegemony had oppressed." Kane wasn't surprised. The collapse of the hegemony had created a power vacuum across hundreds of worlds. Species that had been conquered or threatened by the Coalition were now free to settle old scores. Many former hegemony members were discovering that having humanity as protectors was preferable to facing the wrath of their former victims. Captain Amy Sullivan entered the chamber, carrying reports from the fleet units still patrolling former hegemony space. Her ship, the Retribution, had become famous throughout the galaxy for its role in hunting down war criminals while protecting civilian populations. "Admiral, we've completed the evacuation of cruel civilians from the disputed border zones," Sullivan reported. 14,000 refugees have been relocated to the protected camps on Sanctuary Station. They'll be safe there until permanent housing can be arranged. The situation was unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity had won a total military victory over a superior enemy, then spent more resources protecting the defeated alien civilians than they had on the war itself. The message was clear to every species watching. Humans would fight with terrifying efficiency when threatened, but they would also show mercy to those who deserved it. President Maria Santos arrived on Nexus Prime 3 days later, accompanied by representatives from every human colony and the new Galactic Council. The council chamber had been repaired and reconfigured to accommodate dozens of different alien species, many of whom had never been allowed to participate in galactic government under hegemony rule. Ambassador Carl Hayes, humanity's chief diplomatic representative, stood before the assembled delegates to deliver what would become known as the Nexus Declaration. Hayes was a former military officer who had seen the worst of the war, but his words were measured and carefully chosen. "Fellow sapient beings of the galaxy," Hayes began, "6 months ago, the Hegemony Coalition attempted to exterminate humanity for the crime of successful expansion. They murdered 2.3 million innocent civilians on New Haven and attacked 12 other human colonies without warning or justification." The chamber was silent as Hayes continued. "In response, humanity mobilized every available resource to defend our people and punish those responsible. We did not seek to conquer territory or enslave populations. We sought justice for the innocent and protection for the defenseless." Hayes activated a holographic display showing the current state of former hegemony space. "The war is over. The Hegemony Coalition no longer exists. But the galaxy faces a choice about what comes next. We can return to the old system where powerful coalitions eliminate weaker species when they become inconvenient. Or we can build something better. The new galactic order that emerged from the Nexus Declaration was unlike anything in recorded history. Humanity didn't seek to rule the galaxy or replace the hegemony as the dominant power. Instead, they offered something far more valuable: protection for any species that agreed to basic principles of peaceful coexistence and respect for civilian life. Dr. Lisa Grant had been studying the historical records found in the hegemony archives, documenting the 17 species that had been exterminated over the past 2 millennia. Her research revealed a pattern of systematic genocide that went back far longer than anyone had imagined. The hegemony didn't just attack species that were expanding too quickly, she explained to the council. They targeted any species that showed signs of technological advancement, cultural creativity, or political independence. They were maintaining their power by preventing other species from reaching their potential. The evidence was overwhelming. The hegemony had destroyed entire civilizations for crimes like developing faster-than-light communication, creating new art forms that might influence other species, or establishing democratic governments that challenged traditional hierarchies. They had been the galaxy's self-appointed judges, deciding which species deserved to survive and which needed to be eliminated. Commander Jake Morrison, promoted to planetary governor of the rebuilt New Haven, oversaw the colony's restoration with mixed feelings. The new cities were more beautiful than the originals, built with advanced technology provided by grateful alien species. The farmland had been cleaned and restored using techniques developed by captured hegemony scientists. Children played in parks that had been glass craters just months before. But Jake knew that the peaceful scene existed because the galaxy had learned a terrible lesson. New Haven had been rebuilt not just as a human colony, but as a monument to what happened when civilized beings chose genocide over coexistence. Every alien visitor to the planet would see the memorial, read the names of the dead, and remember the consequences of crossing humanity. The transformation of galactic politics was swift and decisive. Species that had spent centuries following hegemony directives suddenly found themselves free to pursue their own interests. New alliances formed based on mutual benefit rather than fear. Trade routes expanded as former hegemony restrictions were lifted. Scientific research flourished as species began sharing knowledge instead of hiding it. Dr. Angela Reed, now director of the Interspecies Research Consortium, coordinated these efforts from her headquarters on Earth. We're seeing technological advances in months that would have taken decades under the old system, she reported to President Santos. When species aren't afraid of being labeled a threat for innovation, progress accelerates exponentially. The human fleet maintained patrol routes throughout former hegemony space, but their role had evolved from conquerors to peacekeepers. Captain Danny Walsh, whose ship had captured Admiral Vextar, now commanded a mixed-species task force dedicated to preventing conflicts before they escalated to violence. The funny thing is, Walsh explained to his crew, we didn't want this job. We just wanted to be left alone to build our colonies and explore new worlds. But when someone tries to exterminate your entire species, you either fight back or cease to exist. We chose to fight back. The trial of Admiral Vextar and his co-conspirators took place on Earth, broadcast live to every world in the galaxy. The proceedings were conducted according to human legal principles, with full rights for the defendants and careful presentation of evidence. The aliens were found guilty of genocide and crimes against sapient life, but they were not executed. Instead, they were sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole if they contributed to efforts preventing future genocides. Even in victory, humanity's restraint sent a clear message to the galaxy. They were capable of terrible retribution when their families were murdered, but they were also capable of mercy and justice when the fighting was over. 5 years after New Haven, Dr. Lisa Grant stood in the completed memorial, reading the names engraved in crystal walls that stretched for kilometers. Human names, alien names, the names of entire species that had been wiped out by hegemony genocides over the centuries. At the center of the memorial was a simple inscription that had become humanity's unofficial motto: "We remember all." The galaxy was indeed safer now, not because humanity ruled it, but because everyone understood the consequences of genocide.